Hello, and welcome back to the Simplifiers podcast, where we take topics in business and in life and simplify them. And friends, I never make any promises that the topics I simplify are going to be easy. And today is certainly one of them. We are going deep, and we're going deep fast. I want to talk about addiction. How do we actually overcome the addictions in our life that bleed over into our work and our professional life as well? So my special guest today, her name is Laura McKowen. She's the author of the book, We Are the Luckiest, and she is a former public relations executive who's become recognized as a fresh voice in the recovery movement. She's known for soulful and irreverent writing, and she now leads sold-out yoga-based retreats and courses that help teach people how to say yes to a bigger life. She's also a fellow podcaster, has been on a podcast called Home with over 1.5 million downloads, and has been featured on The Today Show, The Guardian, WebMD, New York Post, and so many more. So I'd like to welcome to the Simplifiers podcast today, Laura McKowen. Hey, Laura.
Hello. Thank you. What an introduction.
I'm so glad that you're here.
Me too.
I just read your book recently, and I have to say it is a breath of fresh air to go and read a book like this. First and foremost, it reads more like a memoir. It's less about 5 tips to your fastest recovery ever. Overcome coffee in 28 days or less, because I read a lot of books like that. So it was really nice to actually read and feel like I was just hearing a story of a good girlfriend going through some really hard stuff.
Yeah.
So where do we begin? How do we begin to define addiction? How do you define it?
So the definition of it is actually pretty simple, I think. And it's anything that you continue to do despite negative consequences. Mm-hmm. So at the very base level, that's what it is. Anything that you continue to do or you can't stop doing despite negative consequences.
Yeah. So negative consequences to yourself, but also potentially to other people, right?
In your life, right? That's causing certainly to yourself, certainly to other people, to your work, to your any aspect of your life, your health, your mental health. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So even just internal. I think a lot of people, especially with addiction, seem to think, oh, my life on the outside is fine. I'm functioning. Yeah. But internally, you're roiling, and there's shame and anxiety and all these things. And the consequences can only be internal. Oftentimes they are.
Yeah. And so that could be, overworking. That could be addiction to sugar or coffee or drugs or sex or, in the topic we're going to talk about today, alcohol, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So tell me more about your story. You have been sober how long now?
For just over 5 years. So it was 5 years in September.
Mm-hmm. And I remember there was a part in the book, and actually, if you don't mind, I'd love to read it. Page 14, you were talking about like the first time where you realized, oh, well, alcohol may be this thing that actually is bigger than I think it is. And here's how you described it. So imagine, raise your hand if any of these things sound familiar to you. I'm not sure if you've ever needed something quite like this. Maybe you topped off your drink when nobody was looking, like I used to. Maybe you're like my friend Brent, and you eat McDonald's Big Macs and whole Domino's cheese pizzas in your car on the way home from work before dinner. Maybe you can't leave a man who regularly beats the hell out of you, even though when he knocked you unconscious last week, you swore it was the last time. Maybe you're the one who's been slicing into your body with razor blades since you were 16 because the pain needs a place to go. Maybe your thing is less severe or more socially acceptable, like staying at the office past your kid's bedtime most nights because work is the only place you feel in control. Or maybe you wrestle with crippling perfectionism. I mean, I think all of these things sort of bring up stuff in me of like there's a spectrum, isn't there, of what's accepted and most times applauded in our society, and other things you go, oh God, no, that's too big, that's too me, that's not me at all, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, certainly working, workaholism is not just, yeah, it's applauded.
It's the American dream. Go out, build it, make it happen.
Even perfectionism, so much of these things. I mean, the thing about addiction that I want to underscore and that I really underscore in the book too is just, it's so human. It's the most human. It's really written into our behavior. Yeah. I mean, if you look at any spirituality, through any psychology, texts, any historical text, any anthropological text.
Yeah.
This is just how we are. And it's not even necessarily a flaw, it's just human nature.
Yeah.
And it's born out of this right to soothe and to correct our internal experience so that we can cope with whatever. We just live in a society where it's very, I mean, we like to cope in any way we can cope. We have lots of easy buttons. I heard someone say it that way once. And it's like, we do. It's like you pick up your phone. I mean, my phone, absolutely. I think technology is one of those where we don't even have a clue how addicted we are, or maybe we do. Yeah. But there's so many ways to tune out what is going on internally, that we don't necessarily think of that as addiction. Busyness. I mean, just being busy.
To truly define your own self-worth. Am I doing enough? Am I being enough? Sometimes I think that's what stems from busyness. And what you said carrying on is that we believe that we can bury them, the thing that we are addicted to, when the truth is they're burying us. They will always bury us eventually. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so that's the chapter is called "This Is My Thing," and I say that to people like alcohol is my thing, one of them. But we all have things. We all have them. Nobody gets out of that. And we think that they're helping us, and they actually do. Our things help us, and oftentimes they start in childhood. They're ways that we learn to cope, and then we don't grow out of them as we get older. They become these mechanisms that we use, and we take on new ones as adults, but they become destructive, right? And they will bury us. This is, I think I was just having a conversation with a friend before we started chatting. And, I'm in my early 40s. So my friends and people this age, we've been through a good amount of life at this point. Lots of people are married, have kids, divorces, all kinds of stuff, careers, second careers. So we're at the phase of life where we've been through some stuff, and like nobody gets away with anything.
Yeah.
That's kind of the point. It's like some of us are better than others at stuffing, ignoring, pushing down, burying, but the cracks start to show. And I think we want to believe, I know we want to believe, I certainly wanted to believe that we can just bounce back or keep going forward without consequence, and I don't mean like punishment consequence. I mean, like the stuff comes out, the things you haven't resolved, the things you haven't brought into your consciousness, the stuff you haven't dealt with emotionally. Or behaviorally, we don't get away with it.
And we think we're hiding it, and we think that no one's seeing it because maybe we were put on a very special veneer and a filter on our Instagram, and everything looks fine. Look, everything's fine, right?
Right.
But very rarely do I think we are hiding it. I think there is...
totally.
The cracks come through. And, there's a couple of things to this that I'm curious what your insight is on your side is... I feel like certain things in life have become so normalized in our modern society that it's literally written on our coffee mugs and on our T-shirts and in the way we speak and the way we connect with other people.
Like alcohol.
Like alcohol. Like, time to wine. Is it wine o'clock? All the things like, oh, you're having a rough day. Well, guess what? A bottle of wine's going to make it better. And I'm just very aware of that more now than I have ever been. Now, see, alcohol's not my thing. I could take it or leave it personally. But it's so interesting to me when you start to see it everywhere in the vernacular of how people communicate, connect, do holidays, you name it.
Do everything.
It's everywhere.
It's everywhere. Yeah, it's really ubiquitous in our life, and we don't, to the point where we don't even realize it, you know, unless you stop doing it, then you kind of, it's just there. Yeah. It's just always there. And it's not true for everybody, you know, but it's true for most people. Most people in America drink. They just do. So yeah, alcohol is definitely one of those things that just bleeds into our culture. And we're very duped about what it actually is, you know, like it's a thing that you can do in moderation, or it's not a drug, or it's just very interesting if you start to peel back the layers and look at it. It's like, oh, we believe in this thing. We believe this thing is harmless, basically.
Yeah. And
unless you have a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you need to hide all A and kind of go sort that out over here, right? Because we don't really want to see you and your problem.
Don't ruin the party.
Being a hot mess. Yeah. Everywhere that I got to take care of. Right. Yeah. That's true. Right. And I also wonder, I mean, in your own story, I remember you mentioning this in the book, is that if alcohol, if it's your thing, was prevalent when you grew up. It was part of your family's dinner parties and holiday gatherings.
Everything.
All the things, right? Yep. So it anchors down as like, well, this is the thing that you do when you have to go to work and do client meetings, or you have to, go home for the holidays. You know, what do you want for drink? Yeah.
Right. This is what adults do. You know, this is what it means when you date, when you get married, this is what it means to be an adult. And it's actually like a sign of some kind of maturity, and I don't know. It's so
a rite of passage.
A rite of passage for sure. It's like this is just what's going to happen when you become an adult. You know.
Yeah. Well, so I think a lot of people, they cross a threshold and they start to define what their thing is, whether it's sugar or alcohol or whatever, that they just realize they keep doing it over and over and over again, expecting different outcomes. But then in reality, it turns really bad really quick.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people realize, oh God, this is my thing. And, ask the question, well, is it bad enough for me to change? You say that there's a better question to ask. What is that?
Yeah. So people, in the example of alcohol, we always want to compare ourselves to others and go, oh, is it that bad? Am I that bad?
Yeah.
And because, we don't want to give up this stuff. Right. Generally speaking. So it's like, is it bad enough? Is this getting bad enough that I have to change? I get so many emails, describing in detail exactly how much they drink and when and what the consequences have been, if any, and all that. And they say, is this bad? Like, do I need to stop? And eventually I was like, this is the wrong question. It's the wrong question for any of us. It's for whatever behavior. It's like, okay, how about if you ask, is this good enough for me to stay the same? Is this good enough? Is the way I feel good enough? The way my life looks good enough? And then the bigger question to me is, are you free? Like, with this behavior, are you free? Is it controlling you? Does it own you? Because I know for me, alcohol owned me. It owned my decisions. It owned my choices. And I didn't really even realize how much that was true. And, and other things too. I mean, that's the thing too, is we project it onto one thing, and it's like, okay, alcohol is my thing, but it can move along to other things. And it's generally just this desire to not be where you are, right? Not sit with whatever is coming up.
Right. That's pushing the big red button. That's checking out of your present and going to numb, or going to escape, or going to just chill out, quote unquote.
Right. Quote unquote.
Relax. Yeah.
Right.
So tell us about your story then. At what point did you realize, gosh, is this good enough for me to stay the same?
Yeah. So my story, the abbreviated version is, I think from the beginning I drank problematically, although it didn't always look that way. It really didn't. I blended in. I hung out with other people who drank too, so it wasn't always a thing. But internally, I felt that it was a thing. I mean, as early as 17 or 18, I remember thinking like I was going off to college, and I had a lot of drinks at my going away party. And I remember thinking I felt very out of control at the time. I was going off to college. There were all kinds of things going on. And I remember thinking, when I was in that pretty drunk state, like, if I can just stay in this place, if I can just stay like this, everything will be okay. You know, that it was going to give me this alcohol drinking was going to give me this capacity to cope and be whatever I needed to be to do life.
Yeah.
So that was early, 17, 18. But I, again, like, on the outside, it was very hard to tell. I did really well professionally. I got an MBA. I got married. I had a kid. And it changed when I had my daughter. I hear a lot of, I'm saying that on purpose because I hear a lot of women say the same thing, that it changes. Everything changes when we have kids, but like, the drinking really changed. There was a big uptick because it's practically changes your life in every way. But our bodies change, our physiology changes, our psychology changes, all of that, and you can't just drink and not feel. You've got this like thing that turns on in your brain where it's like, oh, now I have this whole layer that I'm responsible for, and you add hangovers onto that, and it gets rough. So I would say when I had my daughter, I started to feel like this is getting a little scary because I started to drink more. It didn't work in the same way anymore. Like, it just made my anxiety so much worse. And I didn't really put that together, before. But after I had my daughter, I really did. It was like, oh, this just makes me feel worse. But I also didn't stop doing it.
Yeah. And I also wonder, I mean, I think before you have kids, you think, well, I'm doing this thing and I know it's bad, but it only really affects me. Right? It only really affects me. So I'm only going to do it and it's only going to affect me. But when you have kids, then you start to realize, well, I am responsible for keeping this person safe and keeping this person alive. And then you start to see it ripple out. But then I think that's where the shame spiral comes in, because you're like, oh my God, life is hard because I've got a kid and I'm not sleeping and I'm
still working
and I deserve this. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing that gets added in. There's this whole culture, at least there was around the mothers I hung out with. And I know it wasn't just us. It's like very prevalent and very obvious that we deserve this now.
Yeah.
Motherhood requires wine. Like, this is what we do to get through.
Yeah.
So there's that added on top of it. Like, I should be able to do this, right?
Yeah.
This is, I should be able to do this. And that, it's a double-edged sword for sure. So fast forward to my daughter was, 3. And I started to have some pretty heavy consequences. I got a DUI. I had a very, I had an executive level job. My marriage ended. And I wouldn't say that was just because of the drinking, but it certainly didn't make it better. So things were falling apart,
Right.
I had to work a lot harder to try to hold them up in the back end. And mostly that was done through drinking, and I think that's what a lot of women do. It's like you're drinking to cope, but it's the thing that's really ripping you apart. And from your mental health perspective, it was crushing me. So I guess I didn't really ask myself, is this good enough for me to stay the same? That was a question I realized in sobriety when I started to do the work I do and hear from so many other women that would ask, is this bad enough? Is this bad enough? Is this bad enough? Because that's what I did. It was like, well, I'm not there yet.
Yeah, I haven't lost my job yet.
I haven't lost my job. I haven't, I always had something else, many other things that were still in place. So, but that's the question I present to people now, because it doesn't have to get that bad. It really doesn't. And my hope is that the bottom starts to come up more and more, where we see the reality of alcohol.
But I think that's the bottom line, right? Is that we as humans, I'll put my hand up first to admit to this. I will continue to make bad decisions until the consequences outweigh the very slight euphoric high that you get from whatever that, decision you made at the time was, whether it's binge watching Netflix so that you're only getting 4 hours of sleep tonight so that you're a hot mess the next day, or you're drinking 3 bottles of wine in privacy, and sneaking bottles in and out so that no one knows, or worse, getting behind a car and doing that. So
right.
I think,
no, we generally don't change. Pain is usually our greatest motivator,
right.
unfortunately.
Because we think we can hide it, and we think, well, it's not that bad. Nobody noticed. I can still manage. I'm okay. It's not, the sweating in the meeting the next day is not any big deal. It's just my metabolism changing. Whatever, right?
Whatever,
But
right? Yeah, the freedom question, I think, to me is the most powerful one. It's like,
are you free?
are you free? Is this owning you? And I think that makes it really clear.
Yeah.
A lot of times, like, oh yeah, I'm owned by this. I'm owned by this relationship.
Mm-hmm.
I'm owned by alcohol. I'm owned by whatever it is.
Yeah. And I mean, that's also a really good point, because we spoke with Terry Cole last month talking about codependency as well. And so, I mean, that certainly is a thing that you may be addicted to, or not even realizing it, but it's doing a negative detriment to your life, your relationships, how you cope in all things. Yeah.
Totally. And codependency is so woven into addiction because codependency, I'm sure you covered this, but it's the disease of the lost self, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what's always happening in addiction is we are uncomfortable with ourselves at the root. And so we need to get out of that in some way. Yeah. And so it's never about the alcohol or about the whatever. It's about that.
Yeah. And, I think there's a part in your book where you talk about truth telling. I mean, I think that there is a long stage of, well, it's just denial. Like, I can handle this. It's no big deal. I'll just, go to a couple of meetings and wean myself off, and nobody has to know, and I won't be embarrassed by it. But what role does truth telling play in your own recovery?
Oh, gosh. I mean, I think it's a central theme in the book overall, because I, like a lot of people, got so far away from myself.
Yeah.
And starting from very, very young age, I think like what I paint in the book is this much bigger picture of we learn to lie generally to survive. Mm-hmm. It's not a conscious choice where you go, I'm going to lie now. And, but we learn to lie, and that can be something as simple as just denying the way that we feel about something.
Yeah.
Right. And you can see why kids have to do that.
Yeah.
And you carry on these behaviors, like I said earlier in the show, because they're just what you know. Mm-hmm. They're like, this is the way I cope. This is what I do. And it doesn't seem like that big of a deal. A lot of times it's not even that conscious. Mm-hmm. But what happens over time is you move further and further and further away from your own center. Mm. And when we are out of integrity with ourselves, it's extraordinarily uncomfortable, right? So you're saying one thing and you're doing another, and internally there's this unrest, but we don't know how to get back. It's too big. And so you add in a major addiction, like I had, like an alcohol addiction, and I would lie. I was lying all over the place because I had to do everything to protect this thing, like this behavior that I needed to be able to do.
Right.
I had to do everything to protect it. And it wasn't like, it wasn't a single decision. It's like death by 1,000 cuts. And then you're in a really dark place. And the result of that is your relationships you don't have real intimacy in your relationships, because if you don't have that, you don't have intimacy. So you're very lonely. You're very scared, and it doesn't seem like a place that you can get out of, right? Yeah. And so I remember moments with my husband, for example, thinking, I will never tell the truth about what's going on. I'd rather die. Mm-hmm. It's too hard, too shameful. The consequences were too big, whatever. But there was no other option, right? And it was something I had to learn. Like when I got sober, I realized, and it all came from fear. It was like, if I tell the truth, no one's going to like me. No one's going to want to know me. It was just this massive, it's like, it's just so much easier, it seems like, to keep going the way you are. And ultimately, I think we do it because we want love, right? We want to be loved. And so it's all done typically, not with everybody, but for most people, it's done with these good intentions, but it puts us in a really scary, bad place. And we don't know how to get back from it.
Yeah, because you don't want to be judged or rejected or set
Well,
as an
and we
outcast from your
look, and
family.
it's like a collective thing that we do together too.
Yeah.
It's like, you're lying a little and I'm lying a little. We're all just lying a little. We're walking around pretending like everything's fine.
Yeah.
And we're extraordinarily lonely. And the truth is, what I learned is I love when people tell me the truth, because I get to actually know them. And for me, lying is the central part of my recovery. That was the question. I mean, I can't tolerate it when I'm dishonest now, because what happens when I'm dishonest is I start to get really unwell inside, right? And it can be small things and it can be big things. But when I get unwell, that's going to require some kind of relief, right? Mm-hmm. And I can't get into that place. And I think what I want people to know is that we generally think that if we lie, even in just this small way, we do it because it's going to bring us closer to love, right? Mm-hmm. But it's never true. That's never true, right? It's honesty that brings us closer to love always. Even the very inconvenient truth is always going to bring us closer to love. It's the only thing that does. So it's kind of one of those concepts. It's like you can hear that and go, "Oh my God!" But no, not in my life, mm-hmm. Not in my life. If I tell the truth, it's all over. This major part of my life is going to fall down.
Yeah. But I think that's exactly it. I think it's like building a house on sand or building a house on a strong foundation. A strong foundation is saying the things that need to get said with your mm-hmm. outside voice, not only to yourself, but to others, the others that are in your inner circle of people. So that you can break down whatever the problem is to start coming up with solutions or new insight or what have you. I think that's certainly a mindset thing as well. When you feel like it's not a problem, it's no big deal. It's I can cope, we can cope. It's you don't even notice it. It's probably lying to yourself, and you continue to make the same negative actions and choices over and over and over again, and they have a compound effect, right?
Absolutely. And I think the biggest example of the kind of dishonesty that we think is no big deal is people pleasing. Yes. Like women are typically extraordinarily good people pleasers, right? Yeah. We're sort of raised to be, and it's dishonesty. It's really dishonesty. And there's this quote that I love. It's like, when you lie to keep the peace, you start a war within yourself, right? And when I looked at, because I would have never thought I was a liar, but when I looked at my behavior, my primary form of dishonesty in relationships was people pleasing, mm-hmm. And it was like, oh, and I say that because it's like, when you look at it like that, it's like, oh, that's grounds for change. Like, I can see why that needs to change now. Mm-hmm. And we don't typically look at it that way. Yeah. So, and all of this is in service of, like, I never want to be like, we're all liars. You all need to fix it and start telling the truth. And, we're messed up. It's more like starting with yourself. Yeah. Like, how do I even feel right now? Mm-hmm. What do I even want in this moment? Am I hungry? Mm-hmm. Do I want to watch this show? Do I want to eat this? Do I want to be with this person? Yeah. Do I want to go out to lunch with them? It's like, you start there.
That's how you get to be honest with yourself, starting there first. But you know what, Laura? It's so hard to do that. You got to putting your spotlight on you is so hard. That's why it's so much easier to solve other people's problems, right?
Totally. And I'm not like, this is an ongoing forever thing. I'm by no means a master of it. There's always another layer, but I can say that now there's one version of me going around, in the world. It's just the person that I am. And I used to feel, and I think a lot of people feel, like there's many different versions of them, stories about them that they have to maintain. And my God, is that exhausting?
It is, yeah. And all the personas that you have to keep up, and juggling all of that, it is mentally exhausting. Mm-hmm. So in your own journey, and, obviously loads of people go through different types of ways of overcoming addiction. But for you, the moment you decided, I need to do something about this and I need to get sober. What were some of the steps for you, the things that actually worked for you to begin to overcome addiction?
Yeah. So just to because I think this is important for people. I did not have one moment. I had many, many, many moments and many, many starts. So you get to begin again and again and again and again.
Yeah.
But I would say the first step was that telling the truth piece. I was still clinging to, I still had little fire doors that I kept open with groups of people. Specifically, like I wouldn't tell the people at work that I was not drinking anymore because I wanted that opportunity to just maybe if I did down the line decide to drink. So it got really honest with what I was doing with everyone in my life. And that's hard, that's really hard with it, especially if you're a private person to say, this is what I'm up to, kind of out yourself so that you shut down the opportunities to, it's more of an internal thing. It's like this split mind I realized is hell. This, maybe I will, maybe I won't, maybe I will, maybe I won't. It's like just deciding. And I say that not easily, just deciding, but like saying, this is just not, this is not happening anymore. And I'm going to do what I can do to ensure that that doesn't happen. So, and that was all about telling the truth. It was like, I'm just going to get real with what's going on and not withhold that 10% of truth to people. And also if I always tell people to like writing the words down. If you don't know how to start telling the truth, write them down on paper. You can burn the paper afterwards, whatever. Get them out of your body, get them out of your mind, write the words down. So it sounds small and silly, but it's really profound and scientifically profound practice of writing. That is a step that anyone can take at any moment.
So what are you writing?
So write like a journal writing. Write down what is going on with you. Write down how you feel. I write every single morning. It's just kind of this brain dump now. What am I feeling? All your unspiritual, unkind thoughts that you wouldn't say to anyone, put them on paper. And if you're worried about people seeing them, you can burn them. But that in and of itself is a huge deal for people. I agree. Especially out of practice. If you've never done that, it can feel terrifying to put that stuff down. And it also sets off, I won't go into the neuroscience of it, but it's a really big deal to do that. And it actually can start to spark some healing. It's not going to feel good though. It feels bad before it feels good. One of the things that I really did was like, I call it in the chapter, stop getting on the train, but really like, look at the choices that you're actually making and the ways that you're trying in terms of sobriety. I was keeping it as this background thing in my life where I was trying to just keep my life as it was, do the same things, hang out with the same people, not have it really affect me and just get sober in the background. And I really brought it to the forefront and made it the number one most important thing that I was doing, and so all my decisions came from that. I think we always want things to be easier than they are. We always want things to be easier, and nothing worth having is easy.
I thought it was really interesting in the book where you equate your journey towards sobriety as even similar to a woman who is pregnant. So like you call it the pregnancy principle, that when a woman is pregnant, and she's growing a baby, she's growing this new life inside of her. No one questions the fact that maybe she needs a little bit more time to get up and go in the morning, or nobody questions the fact that she needs to be resting and nurturing herself. And maybe she has to say no to a few social invites and things. Nobody questions. Or all of them. Nobody questions that whatsoever, because they're like, well, you're growing another human being inside you, and you equate that like, well, when you are on the road to sobriety or overcoming any addiction in your life, what if you gave that thing, that new life that you're growing inside you, as much clout and space and nurturing as a mother does when growing a baby inside them? I love that. I love that as a concept, and kind of is shocking because I think us as people pleasers, we don't really do that. We're like, oh, well, yeah, this is a thing that I'm going to do. It's like the bottom of my to-do list, whatever, I'll do it later. But actually put it at the very forefront. Gosh, how does that play into it all?
Well, totally. I mean, the thing about trying to keep it in the background was that it never worked. I kept drinking, and maybe I could make it for a little while, but I kept drinking, and I was truly saving my life. And I think that even if your addiction isn't as severe as mine was, you are dealing with your life, your one life, right? When you're not just trying to improve your productivity or make your life 15% better or whatever. You have this one shot, and we have no idea the level to which giving something up that we are addicted to will blow our life up in profound, beautiful ways. We just don't know. So if you look at it as I am saving my life, I'm nurturing my life, and that requires, the pregnancy thing was the best analogy I could come up with, because even if you're a man, even if you've never been pregnant, it's easy to understand, right?
Yeah.
You don't question it. You just do the thing that needs to be done. You don't apologize for it. You don't make excuses. You just do what needs to be done to build this life. And it's also out of your control. So there's the stuff you can control, and then there's the stuff you can. You can't make it go any faster. You can't make it's not a 5-step thing. It's like there's an act of surrender to just the process of it. And it's going to be what it is.
And so you found support and guidance and accountability through AA meetings. And, some people think great things about AA. Some people don't think so great things about it. That doesn't matter, right? The point is to find your people. Find the people that are going through this journey alongside you. Find a couple of people who are maybe a couple of years ahead of you as well, right? What part did that play in your recovery?
Yeah, so I wrote a very long chapter about AA because AA was a huge part of my recovery, and yet I didn't buy into the whole thing, at all. I kind of hated parts of it. And I want people to know that that's okay. And I don't do AA anymore. And, it's complicated, and that's okay if it's complicated. The most important part was, like you said, I found other people who had experienced what I experienced. And I think you have to do that no matter what you're doing. You have to have peers and people that you can talk to, and not try to force the people who can't understand to understand. I see that happen all the time. It's like, I'm trying to lose weight, or I'm trying to get sober, and I'm trying to make my spouse or my significant other or my best friend understand, and I'm so frustrated because they don't. It's like, they won't. They can't. They literally can't.
Right.
You have to have people who you can be 100% transparent with, and people that can also hold you, through the process. I wanted to do it all myself, my way. I didn't want anyone watching me, and I had to get over that too.
Well, that comes back to the type A control freak kind of parts of us that, just wants to micromanage it and put it in the back corner and keep it off of our Instagram feed, and just put it over there. Right. But I think that there is power to accountability. And I think also this plays into what you're talking about earlier, is that if you are surrounded with other people who are going down the path with you, then you can't help but be honest with them. And when you're not honest with them, I'm sure they see right through it, because they've put up the walls, they've said the lies.
They've been there.
They've done it all, right? They can sniff it out, and they do it without judgment, you would hope. I mean, I remember reading a bit in the book where you had gone to a party that was just those from AA, so a sober party, as it's called. But you had gone and had a couple of drinks beforehand, and people knew.
Oh yeah. There was 2 parties in there. Yeah. I mean, I went to, yes, there was one where I was sober. I was like, oh my God, this is actually fun.
Yeah.
People can have fun without drinking. It's amazing. And and then I went to, that was a real dark moment where I went to a sober party and I had been drinking, and they knew, and they loved me, and they took me home and all that. So, but sobriety is definitely just one of those things you can't do alone. You just can't.
Yeah.
And you can try. And I see people try and it doesn't work. And maybe they can grit it out and not drink or not whatever the thing is, but you go insane. Because what we need is connection. It's not even about the alcohol. We need to connect, and we're not meant to do anything alone.
Right.
Though we try really hard in our world to do things alone.
Yeah, I still have this one saying in my head that I saw on a billboard at a church in my hometown 25 years ago, and it has always rung true to me. Failure is not defeat until you stop trying. And I think that resonates in your story when I was reading it. If like there were times where you fell off the wagon in glorious ways, you messed it up really big, but what kept you going is that you kept trying, right? You kept back to center, you back to day one, back to what it is.
Yeah.
And I imagine also your family, your friends, the ones that were there in your inner circle trying to support you through it, what did you hope that they would do for you in those moments to help you get back on track?
Oh, gosh.
How can they best support you in your mind?
Well, I think the best thing I know is this. It's the very beginning of the book. It's like before anything starts. There's this list of 9 things.
Yeah.
And that's what I tell people to say to those who they want to support. It really applies to anything. But the 9 things are this. So it's not your fault. It is your responsibility. It is unfair that this is your thing.
Yeah.
This is your thing. This will never stop being your thing until you face it. You can't do this alone. Only you can do it. I love you. And I will never stop reminding you of these things.
And it really does come down to that. Like, I imagine in my own life with my own things that if people said those things to me, that is the reassurance I need. That is the accountability I need as well, so that I can step up and own my things and get closer to healing also.
Yeah.
So tell us about a bigger yes. What does that mean? You talk about that in the book.
Yeah. So there's this whole other aspect to addiction, and really, like when I was saying, this is your life, I really do think that when we don't, our unused potential in our life is not a benign thing. And I think when we don't live into it, and I don't mean work potential.
Yeah.
It's our full potential. Dharma in yogic speak. When we don't live into it, something dark grows in its place. And we see this. People become bitter and resentful and angry and depressed. And that I went to this retreat and I opened up this book called The Great Work of Your Life in the bookstore. And I came upon this quote by the Gospel of Thomas. And it said, if you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. And if you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. And I got like goosebumps all over my body. And there's a whole story about that weekend, but to me, that was almost more painful than anything else. And for me, it was like I was living a life that was very wrong in a lot of ways for me. And it's the result of that dishonesty and just not listening to myself. So the drinking had to go. Yes. And I think we also, like, when we quit something or leave a relationship, we tend to think, I got to run away from that. Right. And eventually you have to run towards something else.
Yeah.
And to me, that's like this concept of a bigger yes. And getting towards a bigger yes means you have to say no to a lot of other things, Like we don't get to have it all, but that bigger yes is your potential and it will save your life. It really will. And that's been my experience anyway. And so I talk about that a lot. To me, it's a very spiritual thing too. It's like not success on a measurable scale. It's not like having a certain title or whatever. It's not your work necessarily, although it can be.
Yeah.
It's just being who you are, like really being your true self.
Yeah.
Is what I'm talking about. Whatever that means. For me, it was like I was a writer and I knew it, and I was born to write. I always wanted to write and I wasn't doing it. And it was breaking my heart. And coming into that and doing it, I can say it literally saved my life. So that to me is the bigger yes. It's like answering that. And to me, it's the upside of this call to change, because a lot of the change is painful and there's a lot of grief and anger and sadness and all of that. But the upside is this beautiful stepping into this beautiful, bigger yes that it is really what we want. It's really what we want. It's what it gives our life meaning. That's what we want. We don't want to be happy. It's like happy is an outgrowth of that. And it's one of a million things that we might feel or whatever. We want to have meaning in our lives.
Yeah.
So to me, that's the bigger yes.
Yeah. And I love that as an analogy as well, because I think that what you're running towards is your true identity in this chapter of your life. You're running towards your core values and towards the things that really do light you up. And so in my mind, it's very clear you're running away from the things that, you thought were the magic fix, the things that make you better and make you brighter and make you funnier at parties. But in reality, it was dimming your light. You're running closer to the light that is true within inside you.
Yes.
So I highly encourage you, if you are out there and this book is intriguing to you, or you're just on a path right now where you're trying to overcome an addiction in your life, I highly recommend checking this book out. I really enjoyed reading it. It read more like a memoir than a, quick fix kind of book. And I appreciated your honesty in it as well. The book is called We Are the Luckiest. It's out now everywhere you can buy books. And also, so Laura's got this 8-week online course called We Are the Luckiest as well. It opens for registration February 3rd, and it's specifically meant to help people create more stability and resilience and joy in your recovery process. So click on the show notes to get links to that. But if that's calling to you or you're just curious, because again, it comes back to finding that accountability, finding those like-minded people who are going down the journey alongside you. I think that is huge. So, Laura, I've got a couple of questions as we wrap up that I like to ask everyone that comes on the podcast. And before I do that, I just want to acknowledge you. Thank you so much for writing the book, being honest with us today in this conversation. I mean, these are the things that help break open the darkness and lets a little bit of light shine in as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So tell us, what's one book or blog that you're reading these days that you feel is either inspiring you or maybe even poking holes and challenging your belief system?
So this is kind of a funny one. And because I'm reading so many different big spiritual books, and this isn't really one of those, but to me, it's just been so refreshing and so helpful. It's called The Fuck It Diet.
Okay, great.
It's not a diet book. It's actually like the anti-diet book. It is the most refreshing, wonderful philosophy on eating that I've come across in forever. And it is specific to body and food and feeding yourself, but it kind of applies to everything. It's like, it's sort of a philosophy that you can apply to everything. She, like a lot of women, just got sick of the noise.
Yeah. I love it.
So I fully recommend it. She's also very funny. It's a funny book. And I always appreciate that because like you said, there's a lot of self-help books out there. They can all start to sound the same after a while. This one's really funny.
We will put that in the show notes for people to check it out. Tell us who's one person in your network that you just feel is up to brilliant things right now. And we can shine a spotlight on them. And who knows, maybe one day we'll interview them on the podcast as well.
Yeah. So there's so many that I'm still going, oh, who do I want to highlight? But she doesn't need any more recognition really, because she's got a lot of recognition. But I just think, as someone who, I think has a very strong voice, has a lot of positive things to say as a mother, as a business owner, as a, I guess you would say she's kind of a fitness person, but I don't see it like that necessarily, is Melissa Urban, who runs, she's the Whole30 person. I never did Whole30. I don't even follow her for that, but I just feel like she's such a strong, sane, irreverent, smart voice for women.
Yeah.
And she also highlights a lot of other women. So it's like I was like, who do I want to highlight? I'm going to highlight her because she also highlights other women. And it's like this,
it's a ripple effect. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I get great book suggestions from her too.
Yeah.
So that's my person.
Great. I believe gratitude and simplicity go hand in hand. Tell us, what are you grateful for today?
Definitely my daughter. And that sounds very cliche and trite, but she did this performance. She just learned to play the ukulele, and she did this performance on Saturday night for the first time. And she was so nervous, and I thought she was actually going to not be able to go up on stage. Yeah. And she did. And she did so well. And I just can't stop thinking about it, because it's like this, it's just the bravery, of a kid, an 11, she's not even 11 yet. She'll be 11, to go up there and do that.
Yeah.
I'm just grateful for her. She makes my life pretty great.
Yeah. So again, you can find Laura through her book, We Are the Luckiest, or check her out online at lauramckowen.com. Do you hang out anywhere in particular on social media the most where people can connect with you?
Definitely Instagram is my favorite.
Great. Mm-hmm. So we'll put the links in the show notes at the simplifierspodcast.com. But Instagram and Facebook, we'll put those links there so people can connect with you there. So Laura, my final question for you today is this. Someone somewhere is listening to this episode right now, and let's just say she's probably driving to happy hour. She's probably going and she's picking up a bottle of wine to stick into her purse so nobody knows. And she can have a little bit of a top up before, and maybe even a top up at the end before she has to go home. She knows it's a problem. She doesn't know what to do about it. What's one thing you could whisper into her ear right now just to encourage her in this moment?
Just breathe, take a breath. Like, just take a single breath.
Yeah.
Because you're going, you're on this train, you're on autopilot, taking a breath and going, what's actually going on? Mm-hmm. That's it.
Yeah. And maybe, just maybe, she can take a step off the train and go back.
Yeah. And don't do it because you want to be good, don't not drink or whatever because you want to be good. But you actually deserve it. You deserve this, to not do that.
Yeah.
Your beautiful brain.
Yeah. Laura, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.